Thank you all for joining us in our series on mixed DRS, where reuse meets recycling. This is part of a two-part webinar series on mixed DRS, and we're grateful that you could all come. Couple of notes, this is being recorded and will be available to be watched after the fact. As well, there is a Q&A. So you can ask a question when we're going to be having our Q&A, or if you'd like to actually be heard, just put your hand up and Barry will open your screen and your mic, and then you can ask the question yourself. It's good it's being recorded. We have so many people that signed up for this webinar, and I just want to bring attention to the diversity of attendees and where they're coming from. So first of all, we have registered large and small beverage brands, brewers, water companies, and soft drink companies. We have all the material suppliers from metal to plastic to glass. We have governments from countries in Europe, from cities in Europe. We have governments from states in America. We have governments from Canada, New Zealand as well. We have NGOs, and you can see, and of course we have technology providers. We have RVM companies on the call, and we have IT providers as well on the call. So this is obviously a very interesting topic. And before I start getting into it, I just want to say that reuse is top of mind. Of course, in EU, it's top of mind, but it seems to be top of mind in many places. In the last 5 days alone, work days, I had 3 incredibly interesting meetings that I just want to quickly tell you about to get you a bit excited. The first one was talking to my new friend Martine at Rotion, who is launching this week a program in Belgium called Repasis, which is in grocery stores putting reusable polypropylene baskets, essentially containers for mushrooms in the grocery store setting. It's all fully automated with a great IT provider, and it's being Roshun, and it's going to be very interesting. At the same time, I was on the call with Brambles and Reposit, who are working together to deliver a reusable system for non-food products using beautiful aluminum bottles in Canada, brought to you by the Consumer Grocery Forum. So very interesting private sector initiative. And finally, I was so excited to hear from my new friend Armel from Vetropack that they're making a glass bottle that is 25% lighter and also has the ability to put with a laser a unique code on the glass bottle and not slow down the speed of the line. So all really interesting evolution, development, innovations in reuse. But let's talk now about mixed DRS in terms of beverage containers. So I'm going to advance my slide, and I'm going to start my slideshow, and here we go. So very quickly, who is Reloop? I think most of you know we were founded in 2015. We're an international not-for-profit working at the center of policymaking with governments, industries, and NGOs. We have a vision of a world free of waste where resources remain resources. And finally, Reloop our mission is to lead the transition to a global circular economy. We have 5 programs. Most of you might know us for our money back program, deposit return. We work on it quite hard. You can get a summary of all these programs on our website, but today we're going to talk about Reuse Revolution, which is one of our other 5 programs. And from some resources for you, if you haven't discovered them already, very, very helpful navigating the complexity of deposit return, reuse, etc. for bottles, is the Global Deposit Book, which will be updated at the end of this year, Global Deposit Book 2026, available to you for free. Just Google it, you can get it online. And we also have 2 dashboards, our Global Deposit Dashboard and our What We Waste Dashboard. And some of the stats you're going to be seeing today have been pulled directly from these dashboards. If you haven't seen them, check them out, super useful. And if you need corporate training, we have the ability at Reloop to do that. Moving on, at Reloop, our entire approach and our activities are all based on original research, education dialogue, technical guidance, and strategic partnerships. And in terms of our Reuse Revolution program, this is our starting point. We are really excited to continue to bring to you kind of a commons where we could come together and share information and talk about what's happening, what are the costs, how to navigate the complexities together, bringing the experts together. And our Reuse Revolution program is going to be doing that, and we're more than happy to tell you more about that at another time. I wanted to bring up this slide now. This is a study we did quite a few years ago with Zero Waste Europe, and it was really done because there is this huge debate raging over if reusables are better than single use. And I will be the first to say that is a very difficult question to answer because, as we all know, it's based on life cycle assessment, and there's a million variables that go into that, and every single case is going to be different. So what we try to do in a way to sort of temper the debate was to try to identify through a macro look at all of the LCAs that exist on, or as many as we could, LCAs on this topic, what at least are sort of the key variables that determine the environmental impact, so that it's at least a little bit easier for us to assess if something maybe could have a good environmental profile to switch from single use to reusables. So basically, from this macro assessment of all these LCAs, we came up with the following four. Now, for many of you, this will be obvious, but I do think it's important because there are a lot of decision makers that don't understand that it ultimately relies on sort of these four things. Now, production, obviously, making bottles and cans has very energy intensive. Production is a key factor in the LCA. So when you have a glass bottle that's 25% lighter, that's going to have a huge impact on this part of the LCA for sure. Transport, as we know, is a key factor. As vehicles become more energy efficient, it becomes less of a key factor, but it is a key factor. And here, distance would drive that. Then, of course, the number of cycles. How many times does that reusable asset get circulated? That is a key driver as well. And end of life. What happens to the packaging, single use or reusable at the end of its life? And if it's going to landfill or incineration, and not recycling, it might have a significantly negative effect on the LCA. So all of these things are key system conditions. We're not making any broad statement about reuse here. We're recognizing that it's complex. Okay, now let's switch to European policies being introduced. I will say that we have people from all over the world watching this, but we are focusing this more on the European Union because of recent and existing legislation that has come to pass. So let's talk first of all about in the EU, 27 member states. I'll remind you, there's sort of two key provisions in the new packaging and packaging waste regulation. I am not going to read this, but I am going to tell you that Article 29 sets out some targets. One of them is for beverage packaging, both alcohol and non-alcohol, and it's 10% of those products that are made available should be in reusable packaging. There is another target for 2040, this one's for 2030, of 40%, but it is aspirational because the words shall endeavor are articulated there. This target falls on the distributor, which can be translated to whoever's selling the beverage. It can be Horeca, a restaurant, or it can be a retailer like a large grocery chain, for example. That's where the 10% falls. There are some exemptions. I put them in here, and there's also some exemptions on small business. The other piece is Article 50, which is the deposit return article that makes single-use deposits mandatory for both PET and cans. One thing it does state in number 6 is that requesting that, again, aspirational, member states shall endeavor to also include effectively glass and cartons to their beverage program. This is not required by law. This is just a request to consider doing that, shall endeavor. At the same time, requesting that member states make the those containers, if they are on deposit, having an equally available reusable option. So now I'm going to, that's at an EU level. 27 member states, 450 million people represented. We also have national regulations. Some are newer than others. I'm not going to go into every single one of these, but just to say, you know, countries like Spain, France, Spain, Austria, Germany, there is a lot of interest in reuse there. And it's probably one of the reasons why there is a little bit of flexibility in the PPWR around giving member states some autonomy to go a little bit beyond the 10% that is required by the PPWR. So we have quite a bit of legislative requirements in Europe and more probably coming down the line. There is complexity and variation and opportunity within this EU 27. And let me explain. Let's first understand the countries that have a deposit return program today. We have about 19, well, coming up soon, 19. So here in this slide, on the left, you have the 10 countries that have deposit return that include single-use glass. And here they all are. On the other side of the chart, you have those deposit return programs in place that don't include single-use glass. Now, Greece hasn't started yet, but we're expecting it in 2026. Spain has not started yet. It's technically supposed to start in 2026, but Reloop has their own running assumption that it'll be probably realistically sometime in 2028. So it's a real split, 10 on the left, 9 on the right, 46% population on the left, 54 on the right. I think this is an interesting slide, that when we talk about reuse, there isn't just one story to tell. There are multiple ways of looking at this because of this mix. Further, the last group of countries, we talked about 19 have deposit return. There are 27 countries. That leaves 8. Whoops, sorry. This is on the left. I wanted to show you the refillable market share in the countries that have single-use glass in the mix. This is refillable market share. You can get this from our dashboard. Obviously, we know Germany has pretty high. We're told that Croatia is 39%. I'm not sure exactly how accurate that is, but that's the data we've been given. But you can see these countries that have glass, they have a fairly reasonable market share. Most of this is beer already in place in those countries. Now we go to the right hand of the pie, the countries that don't have glass in their DRS. That's an interesting picture. Netherlands, Austria, Poland, quite reasonable market shares. Mostly beer for sure, but they exist in a system that doesn't have single-use glass on deposit. Now the last group, this is those 8 countries that do not have deposit return. Today, there is no law in place today for deposit return, even though EU requires that they pass a deposit return program unless they meet certain targets by the end of 2026. Let's just say these ones don't have deposit return, but they have a refillable market share that's quite interesting. Many of you might hang out in Belgium every now and then. You'll see there's a lot of reusable beer containers in Belgium. So this is also interesting. Even in those countries where we don't have deposit return, we still have sort of private deposit return, voluntary deposit return. The other complex factor is HoReCa. How big is the HoReCa? We ran this using some of our data that we have. This is the HoReCa share. And for those of you that don't know what HoReCa means, hotels, restaurants, and cafeteria. So it's basically the restaurant sector, a commercial sector, I should say. This is the market share for small format plastic bottles, cans, soft drinks, beer, and flavored alcohol containers. This is interesting because it shows you that in some of those more touristy jurisdictions, the HoReCa market share is quite high. So HoReCa can play a key role in the mixed DRS. Okay, now let's move to some key concepts. We have to have, there are going to be different approaches to integrating reusable beverage packaging in a DRS. On the left, this is where you don't have a mandatory DRS. Those are those countries that we talked about. So here you have no single-use DRS, but you still have a voluntary system run by the brands that are choosing to run those bottles, mostly in the HoReCa sector. Then you have a mixed DRS. You have two approaches. One is where you have voluntary refillables, but mandatory on single use. Countries like Austria, Germany, Netherlands, Slovakia, Sweden, and Oregon, USA. Then you have mandatory and mandatory. And here are the countries where you have both mandatory. That means in law, the reusable containers are also meant to follow the same rules to some extent as the single-use packaging. And often that will include them in a reporting mechanism, which we'll get into in a second. So you have different ways of formulating it. Great. This is another way of looking at it from the perspective of the consumer that has the empty container. So here you have deposit for single-use beverage containers only. So here you have where you don't have refillables, like in Norway, for example, or Ireland. You have the deposit return containers going back to the store and the glass containers that aren't refillable ending up in the recycling bin or in the landfill. But for the most part, pretty good in Europe for glass recycling numbers. Deposit compared to America. Deposit return for reusable containers only. Here you have in places like Belgium, France, and Slovenia. So the refillables go back through the redemption center or the retailer where they sell them. And of course, the non-deposit bearing containers go into the blue bin, or in the case of Belgium, in the blue bag. And then you have that mixed system. So here you have all single use and reusables all going back to the retailer or the redemption center. We've put redemption center here. I know in Europe, it's mostly retailer because that's required by law. But of course, redemption center in places like Quebec are relevant. And of course, in EU, we're starting to see some system operators adding that extra layer of return opportunity, as we've now seen in Portugal, where they have about 40 or so sort of redemption centers. That's why we put them in here. So they have to be part of that mix. From a consumer standpoint, when you're going into the grocery store, this is what you're seeing. This is the mix. Everything is together. You don't know, from your perspective, from the consumer's perspective, it doesn't really matter. You're treating all these containers the same. In a non-mixed system, you have to treat them differently. You have to make different activity here and a different activity here. And that's why we quite like this. It's an elegant solution, is the mixed system. Now let's move into some of the key variables. And I know I saw some governments here that are from various countries that are trying to understand this better. This is a very important slide to understand what are the variables that influence how mixed DRS operates in practice. So the first is reusable bottle formats. We have non-standard and standard. That means the standard is the same bottle across multiple brands. I'm going to show you an example in a second, or brand-specific bottles. Then we have pooling arrangements. How are the bottles going to be managed? Are they going to be pooled? Multiple producers sharing the bottles, or is each producer going to manage its own? And then, of course, the deposit amounts. Is it the same as the single-use containers, or is it different? And if it's different, it has to be handled. It has to be managed in a way to account for that difference. Let's look at the bottles. So here we have examples of standard reusable bottles. Germany, Oregon, shout out to Canada. This is the industry standard bottle, 263 grams, a beautiful bottle that gets about 15 lives, is shared by all of the Canadian brewers, or at one time they were all Canadian brewers. So happy to have that one on this. And then you have the non-standard reusable bottles. These are unique shapes for the brands. That's why they have brands on here. These are unique because the brands feel they want to have their own bottle. They want to have that market advantage, perhaps is how they see it. And I know that there are some people on this webinar that might be wanting all the reusable systems to have just standard reusables and the brands have to just deal with it. Well, the experience is that they don't want to deal with it. And they are large enough brands that we have to, if they're willing to embrace reuse, then we want to have them in, and therefore they are the ones that are really going to bring scale in many cases to these systems, because these are big brands and they have millions and hundreds of millions and millions of bottles. So we can't exclude them when we're having this conversation. Now let's look at what is one of the more complicated things, which is the definition of managed pool systems. And within the reusable packaging world, there are essentially three. There's a managed pool. These are systems defined by one central organization in charge of organizing and monitoring a shared system of packaging. And we have Tobias with us today, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. We also have unmanaged pools, and these are where, and another managed example of the managed pool system is the brewers, the beer store in Ontario or in Canada, the Brewers of Canada that manage a shared system from coast to coast to coast. Unmanaged pool systems, these are systems that use some sort of standardized system of packaging, but without centralized governance. And then, of course, you have individual systems where the reuse systems are set up and run by single companies for their own packaging. And we see this a lot in places like Germany, where you have small brewers, maybe not operating in the entire country, but operating in certain regions and having direct relationships with their sellers and organizing that on their own and being completely outside of any pooled systems. Where reuse and recycling intersect, these are some potential synergies in a mixed DRS. And we've, from left to right, that kind of takes you on the packaging journey. It starts with the collection, the automated take back and reverse vending machines, or manual collection like we have in Canada. Reuse and recycling flows go to usually a mass packaging center and or a counting and sorting center. The reuse goes off to wash and sort. The recycling goes off to recycle. Sometimes the reusable bottles are taken directly from the collection point. You might have a delivery at a shop of full goods and they want to go back with empties, and that happens all the time as well, like perfect reverse logistics. But this is essentially, these green boxes identify where some of those synergies can take place. Why do we want to create these synergies? So the shared return infrastructure, one consumer journey for all container types. Dual function RVMs are capable of handling both reusables and single-use containers. You can do it in a more complicated way or in a more simple way. There's lots of ways of doing it. And I will remind you that reusables, they're not a huge market share. So we're not talking about the volumes and volumes that we experience with single-use containers. And of course, they have a shared interface for the RVMs. A shared system of management, it means a completely integrated IT system, unified clearing, reporting, management of financial flows, a single onboarding process for producers, especially SMEs, shared public education, marketing communications, and then shared logistics collection, same transport vehicles for all deposit containers, shared labor, routing, pickup schedules across streams, integrated reverse logistics flows, no parallel system or duplicate trips. And then finally, shared back-end operations. We're talking about shared counting, sorting centers for reusable, single-use, integrated material tracking and data systems across both flows. These are some of the synergies that can be created when you think about those green boxes and where we can share. In the case of the mixed DRS for the consumers, follow the same journey regardless of container type. And I said it before, they may not even know their container is reusable. They're just doing the same thing every time. Very quickly, this shared collection infrastructure. I want to give you a little bit of a journey of some photographs. This is what it looks like in Lithuania. I don't know if this lady has any idea if her bottle is reusable or not. She's using the same machine for everything. This is the back. You can see that this is because there's not that many refillable bottles, they just have them go on this belt, and then somebody comes in, I don't know, however many hours after the few hours, and puts them in crates. Here we have Estonia, so very similar to Lithuania. You get to return both containers when you do. Finland, this is what the back room looks like. And then, of course, Austria. I wanted to put this picture in. I think we have some CCEP people on the call. This is a reusable plant that was installed in 2023 for Coke. It was a huge investment, really positive. And here you have a guy in Austria returning, I don't know if that's refillable or reusable, but again, same interface. So probably the most technical slide, but again, When we look at design and integration of mixed DRS, it can vary across jurisdictions depending on several factors. Two key operational functions are one, governance admin reporting, and the other is transportation and logistics. So these operations exist along a spectrum of centralized, decentralized to centralized, with centralized representing one fully integrated system. So they are diverse, if you get what I'm talking about. So decentralized governance to centralized. Transportation could be decentralized to centralized. Well, let's look at it in practice. Who's doing what? Okay, here you have the left side, the governance, admin, and reporting. Are the functions centralized? Well, at the top, you have no, they're fully decentralized like Germany. And as you move down to yes, in terms of governance, yes, all producers, single use and reusables report to the same system operator in Estonia, Latvia, Ontario, Oregon, and Quebec. And you have some in between. And I'm not going to go through them. We don't have the time, but to say that there really are a variety of ways of doing it. On the transport and logistics side, who is responsible for transportation and logistics? Again, in some cases, it's completely separate, like Germany and Poland. Poland, it will be in 2028, where they'll be officially part of the DRS, but they'll be operating separately in terms of logistics. Then you've got in Denmark, Estonia, Lithuania, and Quebec, where you have reusable bottles, standard and non-standard, are managed separately. And then, of course, in Latvia, they're managed together, except for the non-standard bottles are managed independently by the producers. So a real mix. Finally, last couple of slides, guiding principles for implementing mixed deposit return systems. I don't think I'm going to go through all of them, but I will say a few. Using pooling to enable scalable, cost-effective reuse is a very good idea. It's well worth looking into this, especially for small businesses. Small businesses do not have the opportunity typically to join a reuse system because of the upfront capex in purchasing the reusable asset. If you join a pooling program, you could have the opportunity to just use those bottles if they're non-standard, if they're standards. So this is a really nice opportunity for the smaller businesses that want to go reusable. The other thing I wanted, to point out here is prioritize consumer convenience and universal accessibility. Extremely important if we want consumers to participate. I can't tell you how many reports I get from my friends living in Belgium when they do a dumpster dive of the glass bin, how many valuable reusable glass bottles they find thrown in the dumpster, in the glass recycling bin. Unfortunately, those bottles were an investment, and now they're lost to the furnace. Not completely lost, but lost as a reusable entity. And then finally, these, I think, really wrap up my presentation. The benefits, consumer convenience. Mixed DRS supports reuse. It allows, especially for those SMEs, to be a part of it. There are some cost efficiencies that can be gained. There are lower emissions. Think about all of the consolidation of transportation, the reduction of trucks on the road. It's retailer friendly. And of course, HoReCa has access. HoReCa is a really important, often neglected part of a DRS, and they can significantly benefit from being included in it. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and I'm going to move to the next part of the agenda. So with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and he is Walter Paskowski. Sorry, Walter, if I didn't do that right. I have a Polish name, but
pretty close.
Walter, it's so good to have you join us. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about why you're here and why your brewery was chosen to join us today, because it's so relevant to this discussion of mixed DRS. Please.
Okay.
And Walter,
I would
like
welcome
to share slides. You asked that question, so
yes, share
it will work.
A small few slides just to introduce this this what we are doing. Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay,
we
great.
can.
So we are beer producer in Latvia, working for a bit more than 50 years already, and our main business is beer production, but we also produce other drinks, soft drinks, and also alcoholic drinks. Number of employees around 70, in season time up to 90 employees. Turnover it's 17 million euros, and we have done a lot of investments in last decade, more than 15 million euros to increase capacities, and we are growing 7% growth rate. It's if we look at the amounts of sale products or units. And if we look at the money a bit more, because there is inflation also. Our portfolio, main products, not all, but main of them, you see more than half of them are in glass bottles, and beer, as I mentioned, it's our base business. About 75% of our business is beer production. And the plastic bottles we are using for soft drinks and for water production. Yeah, about the deposit system shortly, what was the impact since 2022? We have this system, and as we are using this glass bottle, refillable glass bottle, because all products are filled in refillable bottles, there was a system before a deposit that collected those bottles for us, and there was the amount that we have collected was around 50%. So half of the bottles was returned back. We bought them from the small private companies which were collecting them, and half of the bottles was lost, so we had to buy new ones. And if we compare the price of a new bottle or collected bottle, the price is twice higher for new bottle. The same situation approximately is the same situation at the moment when deposit operator collects those bottles, because the cost of this collection, the cost of logistics to transfer them back to our factory, it's approximately a half of the new bottle price. But the biggest difference and the biggest impact is that this collection rate is much higher. It's even higher than 90%. 92 it was last year. So the first advantage for the whole country is that we fulfill targets of European Union, which was as I would say as not easy task for producers, because these costs to reach those targets was put from the government to producers. So we had to solve the problem, and we solve it through deposit system. So mainly about the calculation, what I wanted to give this calculation. So we increased this collection rate from 50 to 90%, and we decreased the cost of bottle. And if we look at our business, the savings for this glass bottle is approximately €500,000 euros. So we gradually increased also the final net revenue which we had. And yeah, that's the biggest impact. As we are a specific market comparing to other European countries, we have the amount of glass bottles in the beer market. It's significantly higher than in all other Europe. It's 50%. Comparing to our border countries, it's usually 20 or 30%. And the biggest advantage is especially for those glass bottles, because they are cheaper. If you look at the plastic bottles, also we can make a small calculation, because the deposit system, we have to pay approximately 2 cents per each bottle to be collected and transferred and sold to companies which reuse them or smash them and makes the new bottles. So 2 cents per bottle, it was increasing of the price, but there was also a tax in Latvia. There was, before deposit system, a tax per kilogram of the package which we had to pay for plastic materials. And we see there approximately zero impact at the moment. The cost of this tax was the same as we are paying now for deposit system. That's shortly our experience and then this cost saving calculations. Yeah, the company, it's located outside from the cities. Yeah, we are brewers, we are using our own materials, we are also growing grain. So our mindset is to leave nothing to the nature after we leave. So we use our materials. Also, the spent grain are used as animal feed. So we are as friendly to nature as possible. Yeah, the glass filling line. And also we are filling PET and also distilling some strong drinks. Yeah, that's shortly about us. Maybe there are some questions.
Maybe I'll start. Thank you so much. A very interesting presentation. Looking at the PET line and just discuss, how you've said how you've actually increased the use of refillables. Can you talk a little bit about the PET refillable? This is something that we're not super familiar with. Certainly, folks in outside of Europe don't know much about refillable PETs. Can you tell us a little bit about what's it going in the PET? How many trips do you think the PET bottles are getting? And if you've increased the market share of PET?
Yeah, PET bottles in our factory, we do not use refillable PETs. They are one-way PETs. They are collected by deposit operator. They are crushed and used for new PET preform production. In our border country, in Lithuania, there are few factories which produce. So this material, there is also regulation, European regulation, that there must be, if I remember correctly, 28% of reused material in new PET preform production. So 5 years ago, there was not such a requirement, but now there is. So it has to be collected, it has to be reused. And otherwise, if we wouldn't have this opportunity to collect it, to return it back for preform production, producers, this price of preform would be much higher because it's expensive to collect bottles without system.
Great. So you're an example of a company that is packaging in both types of packaging. And also benefiting from the deposit return program because you're getting that high quality material that you could put right back in as recycled content into that plastic bottle. And going back to the life cycle assessment discussion at the beginning of the presentation, this is again making that single-use PET bottle so much better because it has that circularity that we're looking for. Ultimately, we're looking for the best environmental impact. So in terms of the impact it's had economically, like at a country level, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, shortly, there I will mention a disadvantage, which actually has to be financial. Just a second, I will find the right cash. Yeah, the cash flow pressure. That's the term. But it's not mostly on us as a producer, but it's on consumer because consumer has to pay deposit fee, and in Latvia it's 10 cents per unit. So it means as soon as a consumer buys a bottle, he pays also a 10 cents to market, and market pays to us as a producer, and we pay to deposit system, which when the bottle is emptied and returned, then this deposit system gives back to the consumer. So all the time when the product is at an empty bottle at consumer, the 10 cents is at producer deposit system or us. It's a pressure for the people. Of course, it gives some impact on the market because the price is very important, and maybe this consumer will not buy 10 units but only 8 because there is 10 cents extra pay. That's the disadvantage. But if we look at the country altogether, I would say this impact is good because we have to fulfill the European targets for collection. And this way how to collect this amount of plastic and glass, it's the cheapest way. And we can compare to the previous systems where the waste was collected and sorted. And of course, it's much more expensive to sort it out from all the waste which we have. So we see this system gives a good impact on financial impact on the whole country together. But of course, there are some disadvantages, but not for producers, not for markets, but for the final users.
And I wonder if you can comment on the state of reuse in Europe prior to the implementation of the PPWR in Latvia versus what it is now, but also a comment about SMEs. And I had stated earlier that having this sort of centralized system like you had in Latvia is good for SMEs. Can you comment on that as well? I mean, I don't think you are a SME necessarily, but has it been a better barrier? Has it removed some barriers to entry for SMEs in Latvia?
Sorry, it's a bit complicated question. I don't understand a few words. You mean
this is about small and middle-sized enterprises,
little
like
companies.
How
Yes.
the centralized deposit system for both single-use and reusable containers enabled the full participation and reuse for small companies, because before the systems were very much based on the island solution, decentralized models, and with the implementation of the DRS for single-use in 2022, that was also responsible for reusable formats. It probably impacted the small enterprises. Can you refer to this?
Yeah, the system by itself, I would say, doesn't make easier for small or middle-sized producer to invent some new products. Because of course there must be some registrations. We have to each product registered in deposit system. It has to fulfill some specifications so that all the system can accept and automatic systems can accept those bottles. But it's not very complicated, and there are many other things that any producer has to do before they start to launch the products. So I would say it doesn't give any impact. It's not easier or harder for producer to start the business or go in the market. It's cheaper, of course. If you use this reusable bottle, it's cheaper, and this is advantage for all market participants, producers, and it doesn't give any advantage for specific ones, for big ones or for small ones. Big ones can collect the bottle is cheaper and more, and small ones too. There are some formats, especially in Latvia, we have the system where are some formats available for any producer. So any new producer, they are welcome to use them, because as more users will be for this bottle, as easier and cheaper it will be for the system to return the bottle.
Building the scale, yeah, better economies of scale. Okay, look, I'm looking at the clock and I'm seeing that is just about 20 after. We've run a little bit over. Thank you very much, Valters, for coming and sharing that very interesting presentation and photographs. I appreciate it. We're now going to move to our next speaker, and I think many of you know Tobias. Tobias Bernstein. Tobias, do you want to start sharing your slides? So Tobias is, where are you, Tobias? Can I see you?
I'm here. Okay, I'm just about to share my screen.
So Tobias is at GDB. He is probably known as the guy in Europe that is the best person to talk to about pooled systems for reusable glass bottles and PET bottles. He's German. He really knows everything. So I want to spend quite a bit of time with Tobias today, especially given that we have so many non-Europeans on the webinar, that this will be extremely interesting. So Tobias, I'll save our questions for the end. Please go ahead and start your presentation.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, good. So I'll start and well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be invited by ReLu because it's, to me, one of the most important organizations we have around when we discuss DRS and reuse. So just to give you a little introduction, basically I'm representing two organizations. One is the Refillable Working Group, which is a multi-stakeholder setup of organizations in Germany, managing the reusable logo, which we have here in Germany. It's also a think tank giving information and consisting of 8 organizations, and actually GDB, the company where I'm employed, is the leading partner within this organization, and so I have both hats, heading the Refillable Working Group and being GDB. GDB is, and actually this relates to what we just heard from Walter, it's an operator of a pool system. Basically, one pool system here means bottles shared by many companies all over the country, most of them being SMEs. And the size of our systems is, we filled 6.2 billion bottles last year. 57% of that is glass reuse, 30% is PET reuse. And then we have a hybrid system combining crates, reusable crates and single-use PET, which is very German because we sell a lot of beverages in crates, and this system is actually the one with the highest return rate among PET single-use bottles in German market. All 3 are operated by us, and this makes us the biggest pool system operator in Europe. Okay, so you asked me to talk a little bit about what we do here in Germany when we operate basically a hybrid system combining DRS for single-use systems and for reuse systems. And so the starting point to me is that we have to think about what actually builds a system and what do we mean if we talk about the system, because in many cases we start thinking about, or we start talking about single use and reuse, and everybody thinks packaging. But basically packaging and the bottle, if we talk about beverages, is only part of it. In the end, and Clarissa, you showed this very well in your presentation, we have to think about of all aspects in the system, which is a lot of logistics. This is what I want to address in the first step. If we start thinking about where reuse systems and DRS systems share, we are talking about the infrastructure. Now, if I'm showing this picture here, because think about something very different. If you're building a street, would you really limit the street only to cars? Or would you open it up also for bikes and trucks and other vehicles? I think you would never think about limiting it. But of course, you would set definitions. You would set limits, maybe, that there are special streets in some cases or lanes which are dedicated to only one player. And I think this is also a way we can think about if we talk about the infrastructure of single-use DRS and reuse. And the most important point here in these kind of systems is the point of return. Because if you are setting up a reverse vending machine, you would never want to limit this to one thing. And the second and most important thing here is, and this is our experience here in Germany, is you don't want to let consumers think too much, because if it's getting complicated, they won't do what you want. And what we want is get our packaging back, no matter what it is. So keep it easy, keep it very simple. So the point of return should be one point of return for all kind of beverage packaging, glass, PET, cans, whatever we have. And then behind this, you might have very different ways of organizing your logistics. So sorting, washing in the case of reuse, the refill and the delivery might be very different to the return logistics and the recycling process in single-use systems. Actually, the reality is also this depends on the size of the market. So I love this examples of Latvia because it's showcasing very much how to organize it in a small country where you can share also a lot of the infrastructure. In a market like Germany, you won't do that because the size and the numbers of bottles returned already allow for distinctions at the sorting behind the reverse vending machines. For Germany, if we talk about the size of the market, we are talking about more than 20 billion single-use bottles returned, and we are talking about more than 22 billion reusable bottles returned. Actually, the numbers are almost stable for the last years. The point is the average size of a reusable bottle is smaller than for a single-use bottle. This is why we have more reusable bottles in the market than single-use bottles filled per year, because they are, on average, they have a smaller number. And actually, for consumers, it doesn't matter. They handle single-use bottles. They with a deposit, they handle reuse bottles, and they just return them at one point, and then it's our job to sort them. Now, if we talk about how this, what's the result here? Our return rate here is 99% on average. So actually, reuse is a bit higher than single use, but the exact number for the DRS system is 98.9, and for reuse last year was 99.2. So it's, and also these numbers are very stable. You might or you could argue that this is not the case in other countries, but our answer on this is Germany has or is operating these kind of systems since decades. And so consumers here are just very used to return their bottles with a deposit. So I'm expecting that this will happen in every country where you have a well set up system which is easy accessible, and it takes some time. Now, what's the key feature in Germany is this entire system is organized in a very decentralized way. And Clarissa, you showcased the different ways of how to organize it. And in Germany, we have this very decentralized system. And my simple answer would be, this is due to the size of the market. If a country is smaller, it's you would go for a more centralized system because you can share even more logistics. In a market with our size, you can't do that. So this is the simple answer. And well, I call it in a very European way, it's a subsidiarity of this as a guiding principle, which basically means you solve problems at the nearest place to where the problem occurs. You don't want to solve problems on a higher level because it's too difficult. Now, key features of our structure is that we actually found out a system operator can't micromanage all layers of a high-scale reuse system. So really, that's what I just said. Keep the problems and solve the problems where they occur, and don't make the system too complex. Because I'm actually skeptical in the other big markets if the central players try to solve too many problems. I'm not sure, but you definitely need one force that keeps everything together. And you need clear rules. I come back to that in a second. A result of our system, and actually I have to confess this was never intended, but we found out over the decades, our decentralized systems allows for competition within the system, which lowers costs. So part of the efficiency of our system is really that we have several players being in competition, which is actually a good way to allow market mechanisms to be a driver. And so the governance structure, which actually allows for setting rules for all players, but allowing players to solve the problems within this given structure is most important in our view. So clear rules, even on the legal base, which means basically laws, but then keep the players and allow them to find the best solutions. So governance is not the system, but it's of course a very, very important part of the system. We try to find out what are the key variables in organizing and setting up such systems. And I think a very important player is the size. So one example won't fit every country. So you have to really think about what's the size of the market, what's the structure of retail. Because they should be, in our view, the point of return. And how are they organized? Find the best solution to integrate them. The number of beverage producers. So Germany is a very decentralized also if it comes to production of beverages. We have many SMEs. So we have 1,500 breweries. We have around about 180 mineral water companies. We have around about 250 soft drink and juice producers, and so on. So this plays a role, and actually is one of the reasons why we have those pool systems where many players share the same bottles. And then, of course, it's also a matter of the structure of recyclers, logistics, and so on. So yes, I know these are some variables, and it's not easy to find the best solution, but I think we have to really consider this in order to have the most efficient system built around consumers, because they are the most important player here in order to get the bottles back. If you understand all of this, you are set to take the right direction. I think I will leave it here. Our key learning in Germany is you need strict rules set by the government in order to allow these systems to be set up. And then you have to learn anyway. So allow also to integrate all relevant stakeholders in the system to allow for feedback and to learn and to optimize those systems. I think we are not perfect yet in Germany. There are another decades to go, but we try to. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Tobias, for your presentation. I hope that that makes things a little bit easier to understand for our audience. I want to take the last 25 minutes to have a Q&A, and we're going to have it with Tobias. I'm not sure if Walter is still on the line. I know he had to leave. And Anna Larson. Yep. And for those of you that don't know Anna, wave for the folks, please. Anna Larson is our Director of Circular Economy Development, and she has worked a lot on deposit return, mixed deposit return. It's been to most programs in Europe. I think she probably knows the topic better than anyone else on the planet, to be honest with you, in terms of European DRS. So I've invited her to join this Q&A. And I think I'm going to start with you, Anna, the first question. I mean, obviously, the PPWR is very relevant. There are some key decisions that are going to be made over the next weeks, one could say. And Tobias, I'm sure you're heavily engaged with the Commission because they need to understand what some of those rules are, those necessary elements to make sure that member states are in a position to accelerate reuse. But Anna, I want to ask you about the state of reuse in Europe prior to the implementation of the PPWR. Same question I asked Walter. And also sort of specific objectives regarding SMEs in Europe. Can you talk to me a little bit about what reuse was like prior and where things are headed, and also how it affects SMEs from your perspective?
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be part of this discussion and this webinar today. If we talk about Europe, I would say that the situation in terms of the reuse is very much diversified, and we can talk about different categories. One category is geography. If we look at Europe, zoom in, we will see Germany as the center of reuse, so to speak, and then we go a little bit westwards with less reusable containers and eastwards with more reusable containers in use. We can also talk about the category of products within beverages and beers. What we see is that beer is much better in terms of using the reusable formats today. And soft drinks and water do not have that much representation in the reusable formats. And a good example is Sweden, where I live. I can still get beer in reusable standard formats, and that is on permanent basis, whereas the situation with soft drinks is a little bit, I could compare it to a Yeti. We can sometimes see that. This is a very good example of the soft drink that is sold during and before Christmas and Easter. And it is sold in standard bottles in the crates. You have a crate behind me that you can have a look at. So this only pops up during those celebration periods in the year. We can also talk about legislative environment, which is very much different from country to country. Sometimes the legislation is very strict about reusable systems or systems for reusable formats and requires centralized framework. And there are countries where the legislation does not interfere that much in the systems for the reusable containers. And now the last maybe important category to give this picture of diversification in Europe is the logistics. We can see that predominantly producers that place on market products in reusable formats, they do collect their containers from the selling points on their own, and then do use so-called individual bottles. But in fact, those bottles are have functionality of the standardized bottles. And we can also see emerging, I'm not talking about Germany, because Germany, I guess Tobias can deep dive and present the topic very detailed, but the example of Latvia was mentioned today, where the centralized system for single-use containers created opportunity for a development of the use of reusable formats. And as Walter's producer from Latvia said, it opened for the small and middle size enterprises to be able to use the reusable formats for their products. And I would say that in Europe, the discussion is very vivid, and that is obviously triggered by PPWR, as Clarissa mentioned. Maybe we should also explain what that is for non-European audience here. Packaging and packaging waste regulation, and the regulation is transposed to the legislative systems of the member states directly. And this PPWR imposes quotas, so certain amount, certain percentages of the packages that will need to be reusable as late as 2030. And last but not least, I would like to say that I see some movement in the market in Europe, and it is very well depicted by conferences and exhibitions where technology providers, be it washing lines producers, or the producers of transport packaging, like the crates that you see behind me, transport packaging, secondary packaging, display their products and solutions. So I would say that now in Europe, because of PPWR, we are at the stage of 2 and reaching towards 10, if PPWR can be defined as this 10 level.
Thank you, Anna. Question for Tobias, again, talking about SMEs, because it's a really important question here in Europe and this whole single market, right? So what are the necessary sort of preconditions that need to be met to enable the participation of a small or medium-sized enterprise? What are the things that they need to have in place that might make it economically feasible for them to make the switch? And then if you could just comment on some of the sort of administrative stuff that they have to go through to actually make the switch, because it can sometimes be a deterrent to actually switching, right? Can you talk about that, please?
Well, I think, to start with my organization and the logo you see behind me, we are a cooperative, which basically means we are a company, but our owners are basically our customers. And so this is a kind of pooling SMEs in one organization to operate one system jointly, which is economically very efficient and environmentally very efficient. So I think networking and allowing for the structures to cooperate is very basic for SMEs, because it's really difficult for and if we talk SMEs, I'm not talking about microbreweries. I'm also talking about big companies serving nationwide, but compared to the global players, they are still small players, even if they serve the entire market in a country like Germany. And so it's, I think, cooperation here and working in networks is one very important precondition. And this actually contains this, thinking this way, a hint to legislation. So one thing is allow for also in terms of competition law to allow for these kind of joint ventures, which is very important. So we have it here in Germany. I know it's also happening in other countries, which is very important, number one. Number two, if we talk about legislation, I think it's very important to have a stable and reliable legislation, because you can invest your money only once if you're an SME. So you have to have a clear direction where to put your money. And especially currently in the current situation where we have a lot of risks, where to put your money, it's so important that you know what you are doing. And to give you one example, I think PPWR is guiding the right way. But if we talk about the interplay of DRS and reuse, there could have been more by, for example, open up DRS systems and reverse vending machines by law to be also able to handle reuse. I think this is one example where legislation could help many, especially SMEs, who are not able to do it on their own, who need the support and who need these open systems. And this is something where I would recommend to legislators to think about this. It opens opportunities to have economically and environmentally sustainable systems.
Very interesting. Have you ever seen that happen? Have you ever seen a legislator require that the equipment service both types of formats?
Actually, Germany, it's not the case. It's actually, in our case, it's just actually all our reuse systems, they are not coming from an environmental background. They are built up because we were thinking about the most efficient, economically efficient systems.
Yeah.
And so the same way of thinking is, but sometimes it's helpful also for businesses to clear the path for the most efficient solutions. And I think in the case of I talked about the reverse vending machines, and how stupid could it be to set up two reverse vending machines, one for single use and one for reuse? This makes no sense. I'm following up some discussions in Europe, and I can only hope that, for example, the big players like in France and in Spain will go that way, which is not clear yet. But and those are, to me, the candidates where they are big markets. The systems are currently set up, and it would be the economically most efficient way. I know in some cases retail is not happy, but I think if we take the example of Latvia, where, to my understanding, Anna, help me maybe in this respect, I think it's the case that they actually set up the legislative rules to that the system is combined for both types of packaging, and I think it's economically what they are doing is exactly the right way.
Anna,
Can I
you have your
comment?
hand up, please.
Yes, exactly. I have my hand up because I wanted to comment on what Tobias said, and if we apply the historic perspective here on Germany and why Germany has maintained the reuse systems, because in the beginning it was reuse. You know that, like, even from the films 100 years ago, people went to shops, bought the drinks, beer, water in reusable containers, and they were returning them. Then we, of course, went through this transition in 70s, 80s, 90s, the growth of use of single-use lightweight containers. And in a way now in Europe, we are at the point of coming back to the reuse. Of course, it will not be 100% of the use. This is not feasible and not possible, but some percentages of the products will be placed as required by the PPWR. And if we look at Germany, I think it's very important what Tobias said, namely it was the legislation that actually created the models and gave incentive for the models that are present on the market today, because it started with a 70% quota requirement, right, Tobias, where producers were obliged to place on market certain percentages of products in reusable formats. And then I think your organization is a very good example of this bottom-up approach. You mentioned you came together, you did the networking, you help all your members to achieve the cost efficiency within the reuse systems. And I also know from your earlier presentations that you also need to be competitive towards other beverage packaging formats, also single-use formats. Yeah, you cannot do this reuse for ideology. You have to do that also for the economy of the players that are members of the organization. And let me just fill in with a little bit of this East European experience. Reusable bottles some years ago saved the markets and producers because the war in Ukraine caused a shortage in supply of the single-use glass bottles, and reusable bottles became extremely important because of the possibility to continue placing on the market the products in the formats. So that would be my comment to what Tobias also mentioned.
I'm going to take a couple of questions from the chat. Tobias, 2 questions for you. One is a clarification. How many bottles are filled by GDP per year? Is it 6 million or 6 billion? I'm assuming it's 6 billion, right?
Billion,
How much?
yes.
Yeah, 6 billion.
Yeah.
Okay, because 6 million is not that much. And then second question is a question about process. For non-standard packages, do they get sorted in the retailer or the redemption center and sent to each producer? Tobias, why don't you cover that one?
Yeah. Actually, there's a layer in between. So actually, it's usually not the point of return. While in very big markets, where you have specialized beverage markets, you would even start sorting there. But the usual case is we have a layer covered by, in Germany, in many cases by the wholesalers of beverages, or in this big storages of ordinary retailers, supermarkets, where it's more efficient to start sorting. Because, of course, you just think about real life in a supermarket or a beverage market, there's no time. There are also not the people who can do that. And you could do it manually, which actually happens, but it's much easier to do it in a sorting center where you collect all the bottles from one region, and then you do it automated. Actually, I've just visited a few weeks ago the newest generation of sorting center, where actually AI is also helping to sort bottles, which actually makes the process easier, faster, and that's where sorting happens. Yeah.
So just on that AI, is it getting you excited, Tobias, to see the AI intervention around sorting materials?
Well, it's not only sorting, it's, I mean, why are we doing reuse? We want to fill as many beverages as possible with the smallest number of bottles. Yeah. Which brings economic efficiency in the systems. So what you want to do is of course sort it as fast as possible, speed up the return process, but also have good predictions of what's happening in the next. So we have the first models of AI steered prediction systems. They look at many variables. Of course, there are people who are working in a company for 20-30 years, and they also have a very good gut feeling of what will happen in the next week. But actually, AI turns out to be better. And so it's sorting, it's organizing So predictions for the next weeks. So what's happening in filling? Do you have enough empties and so on? So there are many things that will or that are going to help us. So it's in part still in development, but yeah, it's exciting.
Question for Anna about business information, sensitive business information. With the circular economy, reuse in particular, do you see it jeopardizing the protection of commercially sensitive business information? I've certainly heard it a lot where producers are concerned that they're going to be doing all this reporting and where's it all ending up? So Anna, maybe I'll start with you and then Tobias, you can comment on that. I saw you interest. Anna, go ahead, please.
I would say that we have 19 systems in Europe, deposit systems for single-use beverage containers, where exactly the data on put on market and collection data has to be collected by the system operator or system operators, depending on the country and the solution deployed. So it is already happening, and it has been happening in Europe for many decades, since the systems for collection of single-use containers through deposit were implemented. And the data is both aggregated and anonymized. And people within the organizations, entities representing system operators, to my knowledge, there are very few persons that have access to the detailed and individual data on each of the producers, and those persons are under very strict requirements in terms of the NDAs. So it's already in place. The solutions have been in place, and I believe that if there is centralization of the reuse systems in any way, probably there will be centralization in form of the reporting, because it will be natural to continue with the logistics that are operated by the large-scale producers within the Europe, and only those that are about to use standardized packaging will be also using the logistics services of the system operators. But those solutions in terms of the data gathering are already deployed. We also know about other products that will be subject to regulations. I'm talking about the digital product passports that are about to be implemented in Europe. It will start next year, 2027. So we know that for circular economy, we need the data. And of course, it will be absolutely necessary to collect this data in a secure way for producers and importers to protect their market-sensitive information.
Thank you. Tobias, you had some comments on that.
Well, actually, two very simple answers on that. Actually, DRS and reuse systems are not an exception. So you have the same kind of data in every PRO where they collect EPR fees, because they are also based on very sensitive information. So basically, I don't see any differences to any other kind of organizing waste or recycling business and so on. So we are not an exception. It's all the same, and it's happening in every market where you have to a well-organized extended producer responsibility scheme. Number one. Number two, yes, of course, as a cooperative, we have very exact numbers, of course, of who's producing how much in what sizes and so on, and we need to have that, because one of the secrets why we are existing, so GDB is existing here more than 80 years. Why? Because we always manage to balance the benefits and the costs of the system for every member. So if you want to have a joint system, you need trust. And you need to have an organization you can trust in, but the basis of trust here is a fair balance of benefits and costs for every player. And so we need this data, and we need organizations that are worth trust. In our case, we can just showcase we are doing this for 80 years, and maybe that's not the case where you're just starting these kind of systems. So I would say multi-stakeholder setups and a well-organized board helps here also to build up trust. That's maybe one essential feature here, but I would say there's no way to work without data.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. Anna, comment on that shortly.
No, it's not on that. I wanted to comment on the question related to the necessity to sort the reusable containers at the level of the retail. And so far, there have not been requirements in the European countries' legislations related to the threshold, but I would like to share the experience from Latvia. Obviously, this is not legislated, but it's a very good practical approach adopted by the system operator in Latvia, DIO. We can all agree that with the PPWR targets, we will not be able to have individual producers placing their own individual bottles in the market, because there would be too many of the crates in the shops. So what's the solution? That the producers will have the choice to go for the standardized formats. And where does the Latvia come with their example? There is a threshold for producers dictating whether they can use individual bottle or they have to use standard bottles. It is defined by the system operated in the Republic of Latvia. And I think it's a good approach. And of course, it will, I don't want to give the number, I know it, but this is not reference, because it will have to be adopted to the local conditions, and maybe not necessarily by the legislation, but also by the practical approach of the operators or networking organizations as represented by Tobias entity today. So we are entering development space in Europe right now, where a lot of new approaches, practical approaches, will need to be deployed.
Well, that is a good place to end. We're just past the hour now. I want to thank you so much, Tobias, once again for joining us. Very, very interesting. Anna, thank you for your expertise, and thank you all for joining the webinar. We will send you the recorded version. It will be available. If there is anything you need to know from Reloop and our Reuse Revolution program and the exciting plans that we have, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. Thank you all, and have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Goodbye. Labor Day in Europe is in May for all the Americans and Canadians. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.